if you want to stay and watch it.
I should just keep voting on.
It's pretty fascinating stuff.
This popcorn. I should have watched it when I was in middle school. Like the lady was playing.
Are we waiting for Kim? Wait a little bit for Kim. Wait.
Excuse me.
Do we have all the planning seats filled now?
Yes.
They are, okay.
So we don't need to do
Why we were able
much.
to have the election.
Okay. I call this Planning Commission public meeting to order at 7:05 PM. Please take the time to make sure that your phones are off and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the role of the Planning Commission is to hold workshops to review and make recommendations to the City Council on all manner of policy and legislative activities. In some cases, we act as a quasi-judicial board for land use cases, which can be then appealed to either the council, the hearings examiner, or court. Can the clerk please take roll call?
Brian Mattson,
Present?
Kim Blaufus. I'll mark her excused for the moment so that if she comes in, she can still vote. Michael Benjamin.
Here.
Tel Jensen.
Here.
And Tiffany Witt. Here.
Okay, so at this time, I ask that any member of the public who wishes to give testimony for items not on the agenda, please approach the microphone at this time. Were there any cards that you got? Okay. All right. First on the list would be the approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Should we vote on that then? All in favor? Aye.
Excuse me, normally what happens is someone moves, someone seconds it, any discussion, and then
Okay, thank you, Frank. I'm new to this, so I appreciate the coaching. Is there any discussion about the agenda? Okay. Should we re-vote?
say all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Opposed? Okay, next, the election of officers. Does anybody want to be the chair?
Do we want to wait and see if maybe Kim shows up?
Yeah, maybe we should. Maybe we should.
It's a regular meeting, so you can move the agenda if you wish.
Okay, yeah, let's,
Is anybody open for a movement to postpone that?
Can we just
I can
postpone that
postpone it? Okay.
to later in the
I
meeting?
move that we postpone the election of officers and wait and see if Kim shows up.
Okay.
sounds good.
Okay. Next on the list, consent items. The approval of the minutes from August 15th. Has everybody reviewed those? I second. Do we have, all in favor of approving the?
Any discussion?
Does anyone want to discuss the agenda? Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda? I'm sorry, approving the minutes? Aye.
Aye.
So, sorry, Travis, do you want me to make a statement about postponing the retooling our code till next time, or should we do the presentation next, or do you have a preference, or?
So the agenda items down below, we had scheduled the 2 hearing items for last month, but we ended up not having a quorum. And so those items were supposed to be rescheduled for a public hearing tonight, and they were on the website as for tonight, but we hadn't advertised them, so we're going to do them in November at the hearing. And so if there's anybody here for batch 1 or retooling our code updates, we will not be holding those hearings tonight. We may want to hold a discussion, or if you want to discuss those quickly, it's not a public hearing forum. So that could be postponed until next month. But really, if you want to mark that off the agenda as done, you guys could do that, and we can proceed with, I guess.
I'm not necessarily interested in discussing them twice. We're going to discuss them next month anyway. So, does anyone want to discuss them previous to next month? Okay. All in favor? Oh, we have to push it to next month. We're not voting on that, right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Guest special presentation, which I assume most people are here to listen to, from Kittelsen Associates, sorry, on the exit 21.
Oh, it's already.
Yeah, it's open. I think we already teed it up.
That's 2 minutes.
Just-
Next slide. Oh, here's the remote control. Let's see if we can.
We're just simple country.
And it's even got a laser that works sometimes.
Anthony Yee with Kittelsen and Associates.
And I'm Caleb Cox with Kittelsen and Associates.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission, city staff, as well as the community. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to present in front of you the Exit 21 study, or we've been referring to it as the I-5 SR 503 interchange study, but it's definitely focused along Exit 21. We wanted to provide just a brief overview of sort of where we stand today, but really also provide a little bit of history of how Kittelsen got involved in the project and really some of the milestones that we've already accomplished and some of the objectives that we're going to be accomplishing with city staff and WashDOT and a lot of other stakeholders over the next several months or so. Really wanted to start off with kind of a project background, and this is really information that I know you as the Planning Commission as well as the community know very well, but some of the key issues of how the project came to be is really around the traffic congestion throughout the interchange area. There's a lot of traffic that's associated with just commuter traffic, but a lot of traffic that's just coming through the community as well. Some of the congestion that is occurring especially is really at the Exit 21 side in the northbound off-ramp coming off of I-5. There is quite a bit of vehicle queuing that's occurring at the signalized intersection to the point that those queues spill back to the main line of I-5. There's a capacity issues, there's safety issues, and you know, as motorists coming through today, we experience that same thing today. In addition to that, obviously, there's a lot of heavy vehicle traffic, both today, and when you look at the future projection of what the city could be generating in the future, that traffic just increases a bit more. Also, some of the key issues is the limited travel routes between the east and west sides of the community throughout the city. Obviously, I-5 bisects the city. There's an east-west connection on the north end. There's obviously one on the south end at SR 503. There's really nothing in between. I know the city had looked at the Scott Avenue connection. Obviously, that's not on the table at this point. And so the Exit 21 SR 503 really becomes a vital east-west link for the community. A lot of traffic that's really being generated at that point. Also wanted to look at both near and long-term growth. We call it in-process developments and residential growth that's happening within the area. There's new developments that are coming in line throughout the city. Each month, each year, there's going to be more developments potentially coming through over the next several years. How do we make sure that, you know, whatever investments are being put toward the southern end of the interchange, that those investments are going to be able to accommodate not just traffic today, but traffic for many years to come? And then really, there is certain pots of money that is being invested to the project. You know, right now, the funding is limited. This is not a really complete reconstruction study of the interchange itself. While we are looking at some pretty interesting improvements as we're going to kind of divulge throughout the presentation and sort of through the months, we're going to go through a more extensive public involvement process. But we really are looking at some phased approaches. What are some improvements that can be done at certain areas, and really making sure that we capitalize on these improvements as the years go on. So really continuing on with the project background, really the opportunities that we're looking at is to improve travel experience for all modes. So I know a lot of the conversation is centered around auto mode, both passenger vehicles and heavy vehicles, but we are pedestrians also when we're not in the vehicle. There's also a cycling community as well. So just making sure that we're paying attention to not just the vehicles, but really all modes of travel. And really an opportunity to better accommodate east-west mobility. We know there's a lot of traffic that uses I-5. There's a lot of traffic that just travels through the community that doesn't quite live in the community. But how do we better accommodate that east-west traffic, especially for the folks that do live within the city itself? And then kind of that third point is really enhancing the vital linkage between the community and I-5. There's a lot of commerce, there's a lot of residential traffic. I-5 plays a critical role to the community itself. How do we make sure that that linkage is a better linkage, both from a mobility and from a safety perspective? And really planning for the future, we want to make sure that there are opportunities to identify both near-term, but also longer-term and system-wide improvements. While our study is centered around Exit 21, we know that the city is also investigating other projects like the industrial area, the interchange to the north. So how does this Exit 21 study really integrate with other planning and transportation projects that are happening throughout the city? You may have heard me mention that we're talking about a Phase 1 project right now, and that's really what we're working on. The Phase 1 project is, number one, is really gaining a comprehensive understanding of the transportation issue. So it's really our due diligence, it's our data collection, what are the true issues that are happening throughout the city, and then going into some traffic analysis and really working with WashDOT. A lot of the major players that we're working with right now, in addition to the city, is the Washington State Department of Transportation, the CWCOG, Cowlitz County, Clark County, the Port of Woodland, as well as the Federal Highway Administration, but really working with that group as well as the community to develop a range of alternatives, and ultimately taking those alternatives to the public, to the stakeholders, to really go through a thorough engagement process. And this is really one of the first steps that we're doing right now with presenting in front of the Planning Commission and the community a sort of a kickoff of, hey, here's what the study is, and here are some of the things that we're going to be looking at in the future. Really, the culmination of this Phase 1 study is to set the stage for a preferred alternative. So we're going to be working with the community, working with the stakeholders, working with the city to come up with alternatives. There may be some intersection improvements, some safety improvements, maybe adding some lanes, some signal timing improvements. Ultimately, toward the end of the study, though, where we are really looking at coming back to the community to say, hey, here's a preferred alternative that we think holds merit, that hopefully gets support from the community, and that project can be carried toward actual engineering design, and then the next phase would be construction. So this Phase 1 that we're currently working on and that Kittelsen is contracted to complete is really to get to that preferred alternative. I want to back up a little bit. I mentioned a lot of the agencies and stakeholders that we're working with. We're also working with sort of a multidisciplinary team. With Kittelsen, we actually have a firm called PBS. They're a civil engineering environmental firm. I think they've done a lot of work within the community as well. They're based out of Vancouver, so we're teamed with them as well. And then we have a surveying and a civil engineering firm called One Alliance, and they've been doing a lot of work throughout the city as well. The next slide we wanted to highlight is, this is basically the study area, and going to kind of use my laser pointer here just to get everyone orientated. Here's I-5, here's SR 503, and then here's really that northbound exit ramp that I know a lot of us have been experiencing congestion and potential key spill back onto I-5. Here's the CC Street Bridge, and then here's Pacific Avenue and the on-ramp there. What this graphic illustrates is kind of the major roadways that make up this Exit 21 study. The color coding is pretty interesting. So, the red highlight here, or the red facility here, represents I-5. I-5 is the highest order facility in terms of transportation. It carries the most traffic. It carries a higher volume and speeds of traffic, but within an interchange area, the ramps also serve that higher function. It's really to get traffic on and off the interstate facility onto what we call an arterial facility, and that would be SR 503. So I-5 being the highest order facility, and then you have, or the first order, and then you have SR 503, an arterial road. That's a second order facility. What's interesting is traditionally what happens is that you have the main interstate facility, which is the first order. You have a arterial street, which is the second order, and usually the arterial streets feed onto the third order facility, which may be collector streets, and then collector streets feed onto local streets. And it's just how traffic gets moved. There's a lot of engineering standards that gets applied to those different order facilities. One of the interesting things that we've always noticed with the interchange in particular is you do have different order facilities that are all converging within a fairly large interstate facility, and that really becomes Pacific Avenue and Atlantic Avenue. For a lot of the interstate facilities, when you look at an interchange, traditionally at a signalized intersection here and a signalized intersection here, a lot of times these are facilities that don't carry third order traffic, meaning if you're coming off of the facility here, there really isn't any conflicting traffic that's happening on the other side that's taking away some of the capacity at this ramp terminal intersection. So what's happening in Woodland that we've noticed is that there is quite a bit of traffic that obviously uses Atlantic, that uses Pacific, because these are both two-way streets. But if you were to go to some other interchanges down I-5, you may notice that, if this were a traditional, what we call a diamond interchange, a lot of times what you'll see is this is a one-way street or a one-way ramp, and then on the other leg, it's the complement. It's the one-way getting back onto I-5. This is a bit different because we have traffic that's able to come in the other direction and actually utilize what we call the green time. So we as motorists, when we get to a traffic signal, we get the green light and we can move. Well, both of these intersections experience another movement of traffic that traditionally isn't there at a ramp terminal intersection, and so that creates more congestion that's happening. That's just one nuance that's happening there, but as we further our study, we're seeing other things and other areas for improvement that we'll definitely bring back to the table once we get into more of the analysis. We're going to probably spend the next few slides. We've done some detailed data collection, we've done some analysis, and Caleb's going to take it away and kind of give you a brief overview of some of the analysis that we've completed.
All right, thanks, Anthony. So we kicked things off a few months ago here collecting data, and what the graphic you're seeing here is crash data that we obtained from WSDOT's records. You can see kind of the bigger the circle represents a higher frequency, or not a higher frequency, but a bigger number of crashes that occurred at each intersection. And this is all over a 5-year period. You can see the blue dots represent we have it up there as PDO only. That means personal damage only, so to a vehicle or something, there's no injuries. And then the red dots represent everything that is either a possible injury or a apparent minor injury. We didn't come across any crashes in the past 5 years that consisted of a serious injury. So obviously great news. We haven't identified a serious safety concern here at the interchange. But this is data that we'll be using moving forward to inform future concepts and potentially make comparisons of what kind of the crash and safety performance of this interchange form could be compared to other alternatives that we might be looking at. Also, as part of our data collection efforts, we collected traffic counts in quite a few different areas around the city. You can see here the red dots represent where we collected turning movement counts, which is detailed counts at each intersection so that we can know how many vehicles are turning right, how many vehicles are going through, how many are going left. And this is information that we use in our traffic analysis as we're assessing the operations of the interchange. The green and yellow dots represent tube counters. Those are a little bit different. They just, you may have seen them out on the roads before. Those are just meant to collect total daily volume of vehicles along a corridor, and then we can also classify vehicle type. We can classify speed and things like that. It helps just inform the alternatives analysis process that we're working through. So this here is, and obviously the numbers are small, this isn't something we'll spend a lot of time looking at, but this is just kind of an example of how we summarize the data that we collect. We look at each turning movement at the interchange and record that amount of traffic volume, and this is how we'll organize things as we move forward and put things into a report. We've really included it in the presentation today just to refer back to if any questions come up about specific intersections or turning movements. We can come back and see the volume distributions. So that first one there was the AM peak hour, and this is what we're seeing in the PM peak hour. So what those traffic counts allowed us to do is take a look at the regional traffic data, which is what you're seeing here. And you see kind of highlighted in the middle there is our interchange, and we wanted to get a sense of where vehicles were coming from and going to, especially outside of the city of Woodland. So each of these locations is a spot where we put a tube counter, and the numbers that you're seeing here are just daily traffic volumes for passenger vehicles and also heavy vehicles or larger trucks. As you can see, a couple of key areas up here to the north on SR 503, we've got a pretty significant amount of traffic coming in on a daily basis, about 4,000 vehicles in each direction. Similar situation over here, about 1,000 to 2,000 vehicles in the eastbound and westbound directions. And then you're seeing that down here as well, kind of crossing over Davidson Avenue across the railroad tracks and coming through the downtown area. We've got about 1,000 vehicles in each direction. This is interesting because it gives a sense of how many of these trips are coming from outside of the city. And also these down here, as many of you are aware, there's a lot of potential development that could be happening over here on the west side of town and also down on the south side of town. So this just gives a sense of kind of the magnitude of traffic that's already there, and if that development comes in, those numbers are slated to increase quite a bit.
Sure. Real quick,
Yeah.
do those two counters give you the time, or is it just a daily count? So do you have a time series of that as well?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, we can create profiles and we can distinguish between passenger vehicles, heavy vehicles. And if the data, we can probably break it down even like if it was a school bus versus a UPS truck
Okay.
versus a.
So the eastbound and westbound, you're making an assumption what time of day that is then?
Those numbers represent all day, but we have the more detailed data to do the graph.
So
Show
the
the
council
flow.
wanted, or the commission wanted to see like, between 5 PM and 6 PM, we have that data as well.
Thank you.
And the turning movement counts that you saw on the previous slide, those are AM and PM peak hours. So that's generally how we do our traffic analysis, is we base it on the heaviest traffic hour of the day. So also getting into it a little deeper, we also looked closer in at the interchange on and off ramps. As you can see, we're seeing about 8,000 to 9,000 vehicles a day using this interchange. That includes a pretty significant amount of trucks. And again, as we mentioned earlier, that number of trucks could go up as we start to see some of the industrial development coming into the west end of the city. This is another area that we wanted to take a closer look at, again, having to do with the heavy vehicles. What you're seeing here is a couple of the truck routes that are being used through the city. The red line actually represents an illegal truck route. There's a large truck route that's signed, which follows the green line up here, and then take a right, and the trucks are supposed to go along this way and avoid the core of downtown, and then take a left up on Go Rig. We're actually seeing a fair number of large trucks go right through the downtown area. So this is another thing to consider moving forward. And again, with the industrial land use happening over here on the west side of town, it's something we need to be aware of. Go ahead.
That's like percentage of truck traffic, is what you're talking about there?
So these numbers here are the numbers of trucks that we're recording making these movements. So we're seeing 21 heading that way and 14 heading westbound. And then these percentages represent of the trucks that start here and end up here. We're seeing 41% of them go right through the downtown, and 59% go on the legal route.
Some might be outbound.
This graphic here is to illustrate the traffic analysis that we completed as part of our existing conditions. We wanted to get a sense of what was going on out there today, and then also project traffic volumes out into the future and see what could happen in 20 years from now if volumes grow to the extent that we think they're going to. So this is meant, you can see each one kind of has a little matrix here for the AM and PM peak hour, and then the top is existing as compared to the future 2040 scenario. These colors are based on LOS, or level of service. Level of service is a metric set by various agencies. It's used nationwide to kind of give a general assessment of how an intersection is operating. It's based on seconds of delay that the average driver will experience through the intersections. And generally, LOS A and B is considered pretty good. LOS C and D is still acceptable, but getting to the point where you're seeing more congestion. And then LOS E through F is generally in most jurisdictions considered a failing intersection and one that probably needs to be looked at for improvements. So what we're seeing in the existing condition, obviously the most severe one is down here at Buckeye and Go Rig. That's something that's already been identified in past city planning documents and traffic studies as an intersection that needs to be improved. Many of you have probably driven through here and realized that trying to turn on to Go Rig from the side streets there could be quite a bit of delay. Couple other key issues that we're seeing, obviously, is the northbound on-ramp or off-ramp, which is kind of the main focus of this study. In the existing year, we're seeing that LOS C and D, so it's really getting close to that point where we wouldn't consider it kind of operating acceptably. But in the future year, as traffic volumes start to grow, it could only get worse at this point if it stays how it is. And as Anthony mentioned earlier, traffic has been observed backing all the way up onto the main line of I-5 at times. And then also the other potential area that we're looking at is the southbound on-ramp. You can see, again, if we look at kind of the lineup of vehicles that happens when there's a red light, we just drove by it tonight, and it goes way back up to the north here, and there's quite a bit of queuing of the vehicles there.
One thing we did notice is we saw it during the PM peak hour, but we've also observed it during the middle of the day where that traffic just backs up. You know, the AM, we still see some congestion, but it's really the PM and the midday that we really saw those vehicle queues spilling pretty far back.
I just have hopefully a quick question. I don't want to derail you.
Sure.
On those
No.
levels of service, is there a standardized like cycles attributed to each one? Like how many light cycles is a caution, and how many light cycles is a red? Is it that simple?
It's generally based on delay that a user experiences.
Just in minutes, not cycles of the light.
Yeah, in minutes. So a level of service F is associated with, I believe, 80 seconds of delay by the average user going through that intersection. I think level of service D is 50. Is that? Yeah. So it's based on that. And if vehicles are lined up in an intersection and that movement gets the green, but that vehicles at the end still don't make it through, that intersection is generally considered overcapacity.
Okay. That's what I was referring to as cycles.
Right, yeah. An intersection that's operating correctly should be able to clear all of the vehicles in each movement every time.
And so for the northbound signal there, we did see cars not being able to get through on a single cycle, so that would be a cycle failure, and then that just contributes to the queuing that happens, yeah. And we're seeing that at both of the signalized intersections there on a routine basis.
Anthony, and we can stop for questions at the end too, but Anthony is going to go into a little bit more details about kind of the next steps in our study and some other ways that the public can get involved.
Thanks, Caleb. So Caleb real quickly went through kind of a high overview of the type of data that we collected and some of the analysis and some of the analysis results. And this is, I think, as a traffic engineer, this is kind of where it gets really fun for us, because we've kind of dove into the data and we feel like we've identified a lot of the key issues that are happening throughout the city. Our next phase is really doing a bit more transportation modeling work. We have another company that's working with us and is working directly with the city and your planning staff, because we know that there are future development, there's growth that's going to be happening. We want to take a closer look at that growth, whether it be some of the industrial growth to the west, some of the residential growth to the south, but we need to make sure that we do the modeling work to capture that growth, so that if we do recommend any type of improvement, we want to make sure that these investments are going to be lasting for quite a number of years, not just a couple of years. So a couple of our ongoing and next steps is, number one, the public engagement process, and I have a slide right after this that goes into a bit more detail, but this is really kind of that first step is just to provide the existing conditions to the community. We will be back, the project team will be back many other times, and the next slide will kind of go through some opportunities on how the public can get engaged in a lot of these conversations. We're currently working on the transportation modeling right now, and we're going to use that modeling to refine our future traffic conditions locations. So we just want to make sure that we're accommodating the industrial area in particularly, because we know that the city's also doing a study simultaneously as what we're working on for Exit 21. We obviously want to make sure that those two studies are talking with one another. Once we get to a point where we have these revised volumes, we move forward into concept development. So if we know there's a pretty big safety and queuing issue at the northbound off-ramp, well, what are some of the improvements that we can now implement, or at least start modeling to see if, do you need to add an extra lane? Do you need to do signal timing improvements at that intersection? What specific concepts can we work with? And this is where I think, like I said, as traffic engineers, this is kind of where we get into sort of roll up our sleeves and really get creative and get back to sort of our fundamentals and figure out what improvements could work the best. A little bit more on the public engagement opportunities. One thing that we're going to be working with the city on is with the website is to be able to share more project information as the information gets published. So this presentation, as well as just fact sheets, folios, opportunities for the community to provide comments. We're working with the city right now, and I think the website, and I'm sure the city has other social media venues that we can use to facilitate the dialogue. We're going to be presenting in front of city council as well as stakeholder meetings as early as November. And what I would envision is we'd be at quite a number of city council meetings. Those are open to the public. We'll be able to provide more information as the project develops and then help answer questions as well. And then ultimately, a public open house. The public open house, tentatively, we were looking at early to mid-December. This is something that we need to work a little bit more closely with the city to make sure that we find the right appropriate time, but also we've advanced the project far enough so that it's meaningful for the community to actually work with us in terms of a public forum. So there's probably, a half dozen or so opportunities that the community is going to be able to get engaged. But I think the easiest one, and probably the one that's coming the quickest, is probably through the community or the project website or the city's website, because that's where we're going to start posting information. And this is maybe another element, and Caleb can go through this a little bit more. As traffic engineers, we're also utilizing aerial photography, drone photography. As we start developing more concepts, we're all visual people. I know I am, and so being able to see some of these concepts, what do they physically look like instead of stick figures, and being able to actually show them through animation. Part of that we can do now with technology is with drone photography, is being able to fly a drone over the study area, taking pictures at certain vantage points, and then actually overlaying concepts on top of them. So what you're seeing in front of you is we flew a drone a little while ago, but this is not just imagery, but it's actually, and this is where Caleb can probably jump in as well, we can actually do design on the aerial itself. It's definitely referenced to a coordinate system, and we can actually start doing 3D imagery as well once we get further along in the concept. But I know as a community member, I know as general public stakeholders, I think it becomes a bit more tangible once you're able to kind of see that concept, especially in sort of a 2D animation or even a 3D rendering. So I think this is going to be adding a lot of value to be able to kind of show what this can look like, what it could kind of feel like, and really see traffic moving through if we do some, specific lane improvements or intersection improvements. What does it really look like, and how does traffic really navigate it? We're going to be able to use a lot of the drone photography to be able to do that. So those are sort of later portions of the project. Okay, anything else? Okay. And so that's the formal presentation that we had right now. I know Melissa and Travis also wanted us to kind of stick around if you guys had any questions, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have now.
I think it would be a good idea to let the public ask questions first, so that if we get in the weeds, they're not stuck here. If you have something, if they have something more pressing or they would like to ask first, I think it'd be best to have them go first. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
I know that one gentleman turned in a card already, so I'm assuming you have questions.
Steve Mattson, Cougar, Washington. I'm a member of the Woodland School Board. Welcoming new commission member. My question was that, and I hadn't planned to speak tonight, so I apologize. But my question was, when I saw that your data referenced May of 19, the school district's done a substantial reconfiguration of its elementary schools over the summertime, and at least anecdotally, we have heard that traffic has improved substantially in that Garrick Buckeye area, and so I realize that it's some of it occurs prior to 4 p.m., which is start of peak p.m., but I think a lot of it did spill over. So I just was curious to make sure that that new reality was figured into their calculations. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, I think part of our data collection is during that time period, and really as traffic engineers, when we're doing a lot of a traffic analysis, we do want to make sure that we're looking at different study time periods. I think the turning, what we call turning movement counts, we do during specific peak hours of the day. So traditionally, what a peak hour may be is like a morning peak or an afternoon, late afternoon, or maybe a midday, but evening peak. And so in communities, pretty similar communities, you'll see a morning peak hour where everyone's getting up and they go to work, but also the school peak happens at the same time, because I know I have 2 little girls as well. They're in elementary school. Their school starts at 8 o'clock, so there's a lot of folks that go and drop off their kids at 7:30-ish or so, and then they go off to work. That's a pretty big morning commuter peak. The evening peak gets a little bit different because with school traffic, schools typically don't end around 4:30 or 5 o'clock, although there are some parent pickups that are happening as well. But what we've traditionally seen is that PM peak hour is when you get the mixture of commuter peak, so people are coming home from work traditionally, but then you also have just people out and about, going out to dinner, they're doing shopping. And so when we looked at the data of kind of the tube counts as well as the turning movement counts, the PM peak hour really stuck out as the time period where it was the highest generating traffic within the interchange area. Not to say that certain intersections, like there may be an intersection adjacent to a school, that may have a different peak, but when you look at the interchange ramp terminals as well as some of the side streets around the terminal, the PM peak hour really was that 1 hour or a combination of a couple hours where the highest traffic is going through there. And so when we're trying to create or develop improvements, we're looking at that highest peak hour, and that's what we want to design for. So hopefully that answers it.
The school system is right next to.
Yeah, that's a great question.
And if I could add one more thing to that, because I've been involved in some of these conversations, the Buckeye-Gorig intersection, which is the one that was shown with a lot of the red signals on them, not all of the legs of that intersection are created equal. And so we recognize, and they understand that in their analysis, and their data is showing that. So the generic presentations breaks down into a lot of finer detail, and each intersection has its own quirks in the morning, quirks in the afternoon, quirks at lunch. They will factor that into their calculation.
I can attest to that. I drive through there every morning and every evening. Lakeshore gets a lot more delays, I think, people cutting across traffic. Did you take into account on your PM hours, there's a lot of industrial development west of the railroad tracks, right? That tends to let out of work a little earlier than, say, 4 or 5 typically. I mean, did you notice any of that?
Yeah.
On the west side of I-5, obviously, because that's not going to affect your northbound off-ramp, people leaving there.
Yeah, we did. I think that's where the tube counts really came into play, because what we didn't show you is with those tube counts, they're laid out there for multiple days, and so we're able to capture traffic. I don't know if it's 5-minute or 15-minute intervals, but it's not the 1 hour. We can do these volume profiles to really show what traffic's like, over a 5, 10, 15-minute, but we can kind of create these profiles. It's still, the PM peak hour ended up becoming the most dominant hour, with quite a bit of truck traffic that was happening as well. Now, I think something that we absolutely need to consider as well is with the future development, with more industrial happenings over there. And we know, I think there's a couple of development applications, one in particular that we're aware of that could generate quite a number of additional heavy vehicles. We actually we are accounting for those additional heavy vehicles within the analysis. Based on
That are already permitted, just not built yet?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we're taking into account all that as well right now. And right now, we don't know if all of that truck traffic is going to hit during the PM peak hour. But what we did from a conservative standpoint is we assumed it did, so we're layering it on top of the traffic that we're studying now. Yeah, good question.
I have another question about your phase one. And this might be just semantics of how you explained it. You said right up to the preferred alternative.
Yep.
Does that mean that phase one ends before we choose an alternative?
No, and thank you for that is an important nuance there. The conclusion of phase one is to be able to have a preferred concept or alternative in place. Now, the one thing, though, that we've been talking to the city and the WashDOT and the other stakeholders is that, the study area that we're looking at is pretty big. Could there be specific improvements in this intersection or intersection 1 or 2 or whatever it might be that could be either designed quicker, constructed quicker? So the conclusion of the study, is going to be, here's what the preferred alternative is, and then hopefully also at the next phase levels, we're also saying, okay, this is, does the funding match this improvement? And if it doesn't, then are there some phases of this project that can take place? Because our study area is a pretty big study area.
But at this point, we're pretty much still in the investigative stage,
Correct.
and that will continue for...
It will continue at least through the end of the year, and what we're hoping to be able to get to is a preferred alternative that's sort of vetted through a public involvement process, the early part of 2020, so after the first of the year sometime. That's the plan right now.
I know this isn't part of your guys' study, but we're going to have limited resources, so whatever preferred alternative we may have to do very incrementally, right? And so whatever preferred alternative, we're going to have to choose which parts of that have priority over the others. And I'm not saying to isolate our Clark County travelers that take a right up CC, but I'd rather improve the other intersections before I improve CC. You know what I mean? Just because what's the greater benefit to the city of Woodland? I'm not even
Yeah, it's important. What?
Hopefully you don't live upriver.
Does anybody else in the public want to speak or have a question at all? Okay.
I have a discussion question posed to the commission. So coming in November, December, so we'll have some alternatives picked out for the community to comment on. What ideas do you have for sharing that with the public and getting as many people as we can engaged? Venues or groups we should specifically reach out to, methods of reaching out?
Chamber of Commerce, right? I mean, just typical one I would think of. Probably have a Rotary Club of some sort. Anybody that'll listen, right? The more the merrier.
That big banner over Garrick Street.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. They have one, I've seen that banner.
It's been there for years and years.
We've been coordinating with them.
So do you have any insights of what captures the state's attention? Because the state, when it comes to the interchange would be a large contributor, right? Is it all crash history or is that not true?
I can't answer anything on obviously the state's behalf, but I mean, my understanding is as we're working with the city, I think there's quite a number of major stakeholders, but I think, the ones that we've been communicating with the most are the city, the state, or WashDOT, as well as the CWCOG. I think those were kind of the three entities, although we are working with the Federal Highway Administration because of I-5 and obviously there's the 2 counties there as well. From the state's perspective, obviously they own the infrastructure. I think for them it's a safety capacity within what their requirements are of what's acceptable in terms of intersection operations, and then they obviously have some design guidelines. And so like I said, I can't speak for the state, but we're trying to create solutions or develop solutions that fit within their design standards and their operational standards. But I think you nailed it. I think it's really the community, being able to understand from the community sort of what the highest and most important needs are, and if this project, let's say it does need to get phased out, what does that phasing look like? And I'm assuming that's a close partnership between the city and WashDOT when it's involving the signals or the intersections or the infrastructure within WashDOT. But if we're talking about like Go Rig and Buckeye, my understanding that's a complete city intersection, so you guys have control over that as well.
I just was hoping you would be able to provide some insight on what would be attractive to the state.
Yeah.
I certainly would want a preferred alternative that they would like.
Yeah.
The other challenge that we face, and that is because we are both Clark County and Cowlitz County, they are separate transportation area, regional
Regional planning authorities.
Regional planning authorities, yes. So Clark County, we went to a meeting last week and there was 46 representatives in the meeting, and they had a list of their $236 million worth of regional projects. That's probably $1 billion worth of local jurisdiction projects that weren't on that map. And Woodland was not actually on their map. And then you go up to Cowlitz County and it's a 4-county transportation group, and we're hardly on their map because they consider us, Clark County dependent. So we're, on 2 radar screens. Unfortunately, we're in the corner and radar screens are round, so you never see what's in the corner, right? So that's an issue that we're going to try and wrestle with, because especially down south, they have a lot of people with a lot of horsepower having these conversations, and they've been doing it for 15, 20 years. And we've never really been part of that conversation, and this project is I-5, and it can break I-5 and we back people up onto I-5. But when Pete went to talk to them, they were like, you're Cowlitz County, so that's why you're not on our map. But when traffic starts backing up into I-5, or you can't get across the CC Street Bridge from Clark County, all of a sudden they're going to want to know why we haven't fixed our problem. So we're having that conversation, and this is a very important step for us, because in our comprehensive plan update, we started introducing this comment about, there are a lot of pressures buffeting the city, and traffic is dramatic. It's not our fault. We haven't said anything in our own defense for a long time. This is the first step of that conversation. We're going to have to talk about remodeling. We're going to have to talk about ongoing transportation. We're going to have to talk about port impacts and port growth scenarios for road, potential river traffic, potential traffic. But this is an important part of that discussion that we know is much bigger, but really this is step 2 of the comp plan conversation last year.
Thank you. Oh, Joe.
Yeah, I got a couple questions.
Sure.
Sorry. I want to say, I was real happy at the beginning of your presentation to hear mention of all modes, because I think that's really critical. I think most folks are, understandably focused on moving more cars, but I think that's probably a mistake for a number of reasons. I think, I feel like the better we can make this the more pleasant we can make it to not drive through the city, to get around Woodland, outside of a car, the easier solving transportation problems is, right? I feel like making sure we can get people moving through in cars seems like the most expensive way to solve this problem. Add to that it looked like, close to half or more of the cars coming through town originate outside of Woodland, and all of a sudden we're bending over backwards to accommodate more cars through our town that, again, make it a less pleasant place to live. So one thing, I don't know, you know, my house is downtown on the other side of the highway. And like, that's a very, you know, nice place to walk around, and one of few places that are nice to walk around in Woodland, as far as I'm concerned. And it butts up right against I-5, and then you're kind of cut off from everything else in the city. So, you know, I think, you know, for reasons like that, I'm a little bit skeptical of the level of surface metric, because it it just sort of, basically, it disregards everybody else, right? Anybody who's not in a car. So we're making it easier and faster to move through town in a car, which, you know, if you're real creative, maybe it doesn't make it worse to be outside a car, but usually it is going to. So I understand that that's kind of a standard transportation engineering deal, and, you know, we're probably not going to revolutionize that field here tonight. But yeah, I don't know. That's something I don't know that I have like a real clear question here, but you know, I'm hoping to hear what you guys have to say about this. And also, you know, on that all modes, the one thing that I didn't see mentioned was transit. And I you know, we are, again, it's a small town. You know, there's not probably much call for transit. There is a bus that comes through town, and I've ridden it frequently, and it's very inconvenient. And I guess on that note, do you have data about, you know, if there's, you know, 9,000 people heading south in the morning and 8,000 coming north? Like, do you know where they're going to and coming from? Is that some data you're looking at?
We don't have that granular sets of data. You know, I think there could be methods that we could possibly do it. I know a lot of surveys could be used sometimes, but no, we definitely don't have that granular data. On the multimodal side of things, you're right. I think some of the metrics, or the metrics that we are working with right now, are traffic engineering, level of service, volume to capacity. But as we look through and look at the different land uses with the residential, the schools, just places that people may just want to walk to or bike to go get a bite to eat, I think as traffic engineers, that's what we're paying a close attention to, is that, you know, not only from the vehicular side of things, but if I need to get from point A to point B, and what if I do need to walk along SR 503? Right now, there's some pretty narrow sidewalks today. Is there opportunity to be able to kind of make more of a pedestrian-friendly environment, even though it is on a pretty busy road, but that still shouldn't preclude, you know, a design that actually accommodates that. And then when you also look at bicyclists as well, I think there's varying degrees of cyclists. Some cyclists feel very comfortable on a busy street in traffic, but most of us, including myself, especially when I'm biking with, let's say, like my daughter, I'm not going to be biking on SR 503. I would much prefer a sidewalk or a multi-use path, and those are some of the things that we're exploring as well, is how do you try to integrate that? Because really I-5 is creating a big barrier, not only for vehicular traffic, but for pedestrians and bikes and the community back and forth. So if there's a way that we can do that, and we are going to start looking at opportunities to be able to better service that east-west connectivity.
Okay, that's really great to hear.
Yeah.
And I know you guys are familiar with induced demand, but like, you know, the easier, to me it feels like the easier we make it for people from outside of town to drive through our town, the more money that's going to cost us in the end, because that's just going to make more people do it, and we're going to have to pay for more and more infrastructure. Whereas, you know, if we focus on making it much easier to get around Woodland, which is, you know, geographically it's still a small town, and you could, if it were pleasant to do so, walk and bike, you know, to basically anywhere in Woodland from anywhere else in Woodland in a reasonable amount of time. But right now that's not, you know, I don't feel like we have focused on that, and instead we're focusing on the most expensive, least efficient way to solve this problem. So, but yeah, I appreciate hearing that about, yeah, that you're thinking in that direction, and of course you are, because you're professionals. So, thanks.
I'll give you the public one last chance, if anybody has anything they'd like to say or ask. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Frank, you had a presentation for us?
start with some handouts. I'll introduce myself properly. Okay, good. As you know, my name is Frank Randolph, and I'm the contract attorney for the city. I've done it for about 2 years. Travis and I got here about the same time, and I have enjoyed working with the Planning Commission. I've been involved. We've gotten quasi-judicial proceedings. We went through a massive hearing. This place, I mean, the most packed I've ever seen this room was during a Planning Commission. This room was full, the hall was full. It's pretty interesting stuff. Woodland's a great community. I love the southern slope of Mount St. Helens. I love the Lewis River, and it's a great place, and you have tremendous growth coming up. A friend of mine is a contract attorney for Ridgefield, and that community's gone through some amazing, transitions, and we're poised to do that too. Already the pressures are pushing up, and part of it is I enjoy the Planning Commission because your job is to collect information, collect input from your fellow citizens, and have a robust discussion. And from what I have watched is that a lot of times when something comes in, like an amendment of the comp plan, stuff is all over the place. There's all kinds of allegations going on. There's all kinds of information and misinformation. But what I've seen the Planning Commission do, sometimes heatedly, sometimes all sorts of things, is in the course of that discussion, you really raise the level of knowledge. You raise the input, you have inputs. You're going to have people that are pro-development. You're going to have people that are anti-development. You're going to have people that are falling in between. And so what happens is finally you come up with a package, and the city council does not have to follow it. They can skip it. But what happens is that while at the learning level you start here with the process, you end up here. And by doing that, that is where the city council begins, and that's important to have the knowledge. But there are fundamental, who has had training here on the Public Records Act or the Open Public Meeting Act? Three? Have you not had it? And it's interesting because a lot of times how you do something is just as important as what you do. And I periodically learn that lesson the hard way, throughout life. But what happens is that you're supposed to be taking input from the public. You're supposed to be collecting information, and you're supposed to be having a robust discussion. But when you take information like an email or a letter or a card or something, that is a document that you're here because you're citizens, but you're also, by sitting here, you're agents of the city. So when you take emails, that is a public document. If someone is saying, I'm furious about this, I'd like it, it's something that you're using. And if you're not careful, you've created a public record. Ideally, if money was no object, you'd have computers and cell phones that you just use for public business. So when someone wanted something, you could turn it over to Mary and just say, have at it, take a look at it. Because to the extent that you use your personal cell phones and your computers to gather information, you are making your instruments city instruments. And so when they get a public records request, if it's in part of the official city's documents, they can do the scans, they can do the searches. But if you're sitting on something that relates to that response, and they don't have access or know about it, then the city has made a mistake. And social media is a wonderful tool. I mean, what's happened in our lifetimes is just as impressive as the Gutenberg press in terms of the impacts that it has. But how you do it is important. And so social media is great because everyone can get on and give home, and the city has social media. And part of it is that if you can get a social media, if you wanted a planning commission input, you could do it, but you would need to really do it not personally, but through the clerk treasurer's office, because then they would be aware of it, they would have a chance to monitor it, and it would go in there. But you'd have to be careful, because on Facebook, because the public record is that you don't want a record sitting somewhere that we don't respond to if the city gets a request. Likewise, you have to be careful, because what the Public Record Act says is that the public owns public records, so they have a right to access it. Lots of exceptions to it. These laws have been around for decades. So the tension between the public has a full right to know, the public should be able to watch the process, but we also have to have functional government. So you have a give and take that's gone over a while, and for the most part, it's a workable arrangement. But surprises come up, and so you have to be careful when you use stuff in social media. And I've handed out basically kind of a summary of the Public Records Act. If you've seen it, you'll hear it a bunch of times. You'll hear it a bunch of times more. And also the Open Public Meeting Act. All the quotes are, for the most part, pulled from an open government resource manual that's done by the AG that's available online. It's about 70 pages, probably goes in more thickly. All I can say is and what it's come up with is that if something feels wrong, pursue it. You have a terrific development staff that's very available to you to ask questions. If you have a bad feeling, you can email, you can talk to them, and they can give you feedback. Likewise, if they don't know the answer, they can push it up. A lot of answers I don't know. I have to hit the books and go to it. But at the same time, and I'm a contract attorney, so if you and I just have philosophical discussions, that may be a bill for the city that you didn't mean to do. But I've handed out my cards because already in less than 2 years, issues come up that I'd like to know. Because anytime with a problem, if you see something early and identify as a possible problem, maybe it isn't, but you have a lot of options. If you go too far down the line, you have a problem. And the teeth that are related to the Public Records Act and the Open Public Meeting Act is significant. If you fail to produce a public record that should be produced, the city can end up with a fine of $100 a day, right? Per document. So if you hold back 5 documents for 6 months while it's going through, that's run up a tremendous bill. Also, if someone proves it, they get their attorney's fees done. The Open Public Meeting Act, you can end, if you have a meeting, and that, like one of the ways with social media, is if you have some page and that all of you post, the public has the right to observe how you make decisions. And while you're doing that, theoretically, if you say, well, we're having the discussion, I disagree, I don't think we should change the comp plan in that way. If you have that discussion, there are notice requirements. If the public has to have notice that at a certain time, at least 24 hours in advance, that you're going to be dealing with the subject. If you have a discussion on the social media, it's in the public, but you've missed all those notice requirements so that people can watch it. And so you will have problems. That can result in a fine to you individually of $500 or $1,000 for more. Again, the city would have to pay attorney's fees, and people use it all the time. There are excellent reasons behind Public Records Act. There's excellent reasons behind the Open Public Meeting Act, but people can also use it. If you're smart, you can use it to punish someone because you don't like their decisions. Right now, we have a Public Records Act that is so extensive that it's going to be about 2 years before we can finish producing everything. So it's an important thing for you to know. If you have questions, ask the staff. If you have questions, please ask me, because I'd rather get involved early. Before I start going through the social media policy, do any of you have any questions? Sir?
There is like potential personal liability for this too, not just to the city.
Correct. I mean, with the Public Record Act, it would be, for failing to produce it, it would be a bill for the city. But with an Open Public Meeting Act, the person violating it can be fined up to $500 for the first time, up to $1,000 for subsequent times, and you can also be subject to an injunction, a court saying, don't do it. And then if you violate that, you're contempt of court, and it gets pain in the neck. But hopefully we would have discussions long before that was even a possibility. Good question. Okay, looking at the social media policy, I've just had some of the highlights that I've looked at. One of the policies, use of any and all social media by City of Woodland departments and or divisions must receive prior approval from the city clerk's treasurer or designee and will be subject to review by the city administrator. So even before you set it up, you would need to get the clerk treasurer's office involved, and that really is for your protection and for the city as well. There may be things already set up, but you would need to do that. The city, sir?
What constitutes use of social media? If I see a post out there on Facebook someplace and feel like I want to comment on that, is that what you're talking about?
That's what you have to be. That's what you have to be confident about, because by you commenting on that, you have created a document. Because, basically, if you're talking about city business, if you just say, you have created a document, because a document doesn't have to be a piece of paper. It can be something. And so you have that somewhere. Maybe it's on someone's Facebook page or something like that, and they talked about it and you're aware of it.
So someone makes an uneducated comment. I was going to say stupid, but I won't. So an uneducated comment, and so I take the time to explain what's really happening. Is that creating something that is a public record?
Yes.
Okay.
Basically, if it's about city business, you have created that record.
Okay.
And the other thing is that you'd have to be careful about is that if you made a comment and then two other members, made comments too, now you have a violation of the Open Public Meeting Act. Even if they weren't all at the same time, if one person posted on Monday, someone else posted on Wednesday, someone else posted, that is what's called sort of sequential meeting.
Right.
And that's what you have to be careful about. So part of it again is that if you have a need, you can set up, the Planning Commission could have a web page separate from the city's web page if you had the value, but it would need to be set up. Pete would have to agree with it, and then you have something. Then everyone knows about it, and then you would not have the problems with the Public Record Act, but you would still have a possible problem with the Open Public Meeting Act.
So you're not talking just about Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that. You're talking about web pages. Also, when you set up social media, you're talking about more about setting up a web page.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll add to that. On Facebook, you can, and some of the other social media sites, you can create your own group within it and then house a conversation. So kind of like having your own web page, but it's still social media because it's within Facebook. You might create a space in there, represent yourself as a planning commissioner, and then run a conversation there, which is a good way to get public input, but can be tricky as far as Open Public Meeting Act policies go.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's see. Designated department division staff will be responsible for the content and upkeep. Again, basically having someone aware of what you're doing. Social media sites currently approved for use by the city departments divisions includes Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and blogs. So again, this is a key tool. It's almost, being told don't use social media or don't use the internet. It's like saying don't use books. You know, I mean, you can't do it, but what you need to do is make sure the clerk treasurer's office is aware that you can have a discussion, maybe there's not reasons for it, but set it up and have that value. And what a lot of that may be, again, is people being able to post on it, and, you know, but be careful, don't start arguing about it or having your arguments, you know, thank people for the input, you know, you might be able to correct them on something, but be careful how y'all interact, because then you would have a problem with the Open Public Meeting Act.
So if one of us sets something up, just maybe we shouldn't get involved with other people's social media for the most part?
I would, I mean, and that's the frustrating thing, because the whole value, I mean, of having a planning commission is taking public input and discussing it, and that is a good thing, and that's what the city is. But this is how, the how is just as important as the what, because you don't want to violate these policies in the process.
I usually don't respond to dumb comments on Facebook because it seems pointless most of the time, but you can always direct them to the email that we have on the City of Woodland, and it's all above board.
Right, and then it's going through the system, and if someone's upset about it, you want to know, maybe, but you want to know. But if it's going through a city media site, then you have protection on that. Official City of Woodland social media sites are subject to state of Washington public records laws. That's what we're talking about. If you go on a web page somewhere and talk about your business, it's on there. Whenever possible, such sites should clearly indicate that any content posted or submitted for posting is subject to public disclosure. Because again, if you have an official site, you have that warning, because someone could be mad by saying, well, you know, even though I posted it on the internet, that was just a confidential communication to you. And it can't be that way. So having some warnings. And then the other thing that you also have to be careful of is that you will be exposed to privileged information. If you express it, you are in effect waiving that privilege for the city. So again, having someone like the clerk treasurer's office involved is for your own protection. City employees and our elected officials are prohibited from disclosing any information via social media that's confidential, which is what we said. And this policy applies to all City of Woodland departments, divisions, and employees. So obviously, it applies to you. So there's a lot can be done. You have a great staff to help you. If you have hard issues or if you sense something wrong, let me know. If you know where, because the tools that you need for your job are there. It's just you have to figure out how to use them. Any questions?
I know Travis appears to have one.
So, it's interesting because YouTube is a great example, because this meeting is a public record, or a public meeting, and it will appear on YouTube. And so you theoretically could go home at the end of the night and look it up on YouTube, and you will see members of the public will be commenting, even potentially live, commenting back and forth about the discussion that's going on YouTube. So you have access to that because that conversation on YouTube is a public record. I would rather have you, rather than starting to dive into that conversation, if you see something that's blatantly wrong, what you should do is send me an email, and maybe we can put some time on the agenda for the next meeting where you can say, staff, will you please, I saw this being incorrectly discussed, will you please clarify what's on the record? Because you're here. This is your opportunity to participate and interact with the public. You don't want to go home at 11 o'clock and then start interacting with the ones who didn't care enough to actually show up, but they're at home sniping about what you have to say. You should probably try and establish some kind of guidelines. Don't engage with them, bring it back and let's talk about it next month and let's clarify for the record. That way we don't get into this kind of situation. That would be my preference, especially because, like you pointed out, that if one of you is discussing it tonight, 2 weeks later, somebody else, one of you logs on, now we've got 2 out of 2 months later, if you accidentally enter something, you're number 3, all of a sudden it becomes a problem, and I'd much rather that we just talk about it at the members' meeting rather than praying that 3 of you don't accidentally enter the same conversation. to the council itself.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, and I wish Kim was here, because I believe she has some sort of social media presence, about being on the commission, is that right? And I haven't seen it. I tried to find it, but I think it was...
I left her copies of the materials in my car too, so.
It may just be that I don't understand how to use it, but it seemed like maybe it was private, and does that present any additional...
It's hard to do anything privately on the internet.
Sure. I couldn't look at it without
I didn't know.
having a Facebook account.
I'm not gonna look for it. I'm not invited to it, I'm not gonna look for it.
So I'm sorry.
I couldn't look at her, and I saw it on the Chamber of Commerce website. Had a link to a Facebook page, I believe, and I could have this all wrong, and I apologize if I'm just confusing everyone.
I couldn't find her.
Okay.
And part of the reason why we're having this discussion is if there is a group that is set up where you're discussing planning commission data, it needs to be subject to public disclosure. So it doesn't necessarily mean you can't talk about these items, but you need to recognize that everything you say is discoverable, and you may be asked to turn over your entire Facebook history if it's been determined that your entire Facebook history has something to do with talking about your role as a planning commission member. You may not be prepared for everything that you say to be publicly disclosed, but because you've done it, it may be publicly disclosed.
Okay, so it's publicly disclosable. My guess is because it's not, because it's just her as far as I know. So there's I don't think there's any open public meetings issue. I guess I'm wondering, like, to me it seems like it's okay that it's not available for everyone to see because it's not.
Well, I mean, I haven't seen it, but my thought is that yes, I mean, if she is just speaking herself, and I mean, two people can discuss, I mean, the two of you can discuss it. It's just that if one of you then brings in a third, you have a sequential meeting. But that Facebook or that social media page is creating public records, because the definition of a public record, again, is very broad. It is a writing which can be electronic that's prepared, owned, used, or retained by the agency. And used is very big. I mean, if you read social media and go, okay, people are opposed to this project, you're using it, it is a public record. But if Mary gets a Public Records Act request and she doesn't know about this, she will give an incomplete response.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to manage.
But because, and this is, unfortunately, I'm sorry, this is all hypothetical, but like, because I'm assuming it's just her and none of the others of us are commenting on it, like, there's no obligation for that to be, like, publicly available to everyone. In the instance of a, public records request, then, it triggers that. But there's no reason just some guy off the street should be able to see it.
Well, yes,
No
I mean, the bottom line is that if she posted something and you read it,
Well, even private emails between two people, if it regards city business, could be a public record.
Right, but in
So
terms-
The same would be for a private Facebook page or a public Facebook page. If something was discussed there that related to business that came up at a commission meeting or a council meeting, then that could be requested as a public record.
Right, so it's subject to public record
Yes.
requirements, but that doesn't mean that, that before that request is made, it has to be public. It's just when that request is made.
I mean, the question is action, and discussion is action. So part of it is, I mean, you have some person, someone has posted, one of you, the five of you has posted something, and it just so happens that two people read it. I don't think that would be a violation itself, because only one person is active and the other two. But if on a Facebook page you read something, and then you sent an email to someone saying, hey, I agree with you on that point, I think that's what we should do, and then that person meets the other person and say, hey, I mean, you've just had you've just discussed something, maybe over the course of days or weeks, but that's what you have to be careful about.
Okay.
That's why I use the example of the YouTube, because that already is out there in the public. Anybody can log on to YouTube and watch this video, and they can log on to YouTube and follow the public conversation that's going on when you're not in it. And it technically is already a public record, and if somebody asked us for a public records request, then we would probably say, well, the video is available online. The conversation that was held privately, even though it's not a public record that we're keeping, it already is publicly out there. Now, the issue of Facebook is a little more difficult because it's not publicly out there. I have a Facebook page, but I haven't updated it in like 4 years. So if somebody asked me for my Facebook public records, the answer to that would be, well, there are none, because I haven't done any since I came to Woodland, and so anything you read is going to be the old stuff that I was doing 4 years ago, and it's not a public record.
And like Travis said, is communicating with the staff is a freebie. I mean, if you're concerned about something and you send an email, that's not a meeting because it's not actually a commissioner. He becomes, or they become aware of it, and they can do with it, or they can advise you. Don't worry about it. It's no big deal. So if you have an issue, go to your staff. That's probably the first thing. If you have something that's complicated, and that may even be that sort of like, should I talk to Frank about that? Travis could probably say, no, not necessary, or by all means, yes. Because again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
And the important thing to remember in that is if you're going to set up, or if you want to set up a conversation, say about comprehensive plan update, Facebook as the planning commission member, you can talk to Mary and she can set it up, and Mary can get all of that, so that when somebody asks for it, Mary gets on the Facebook page and downloads your entire Facebook conversation. Your other conversations with everybody else on your private account, it's not part of the public record, because the account that we set up for you, that's the menu, and you can say whatever you want. You're just going to be held accountable for it, because everybody's going to get a chance to read. So there is a route to do that. We just need to make sure that you understand that everything you say is a public record, if you're saying it as a public record.
And has anyone done that yet? Has anyone gone that route?
No. So we're having that conversation right now.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any other
Or,
questions?
I'm sorry, I shouldn't say no, because there are county-related pages that have been set up for various.
Okay.
I just don't know all of the ones that exist.
Okay.
Thanks for scaring us, Frank.
Okay, that was my job.
Thanks a lot,
Thank you.
And I would like to point out the benefit of being planning commission members is you have this wonderful forum every month to have the conversation with the public. So you don't necessarily have to have all of those accounts and emails. You have us. Yeah.
Great, yep.
Okay. Moving on to the final staff reports, I guess. I'll give the public one more time to say anything, should you choose. Okay. Do you want to wrap this stuff up with the staff reports, and then we'll go home?
Sure. Okay. Is this volume okay? I think it's okay. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. All right. So at our last planning meeting, Kim brought up an idea that I thought was a good one. She wanted to make sure if we had discussion, and staff said that they were going to follow up on something, that we had a way of revisiting that on the agenda. And a way that I've done this before in other commissions that I've been a part of is we include a part that's called old business on the agenda. So it's pretty common, maybe you've heard of that. So we put this on the agenda this time, old business, and one of the conversations that we had last time that I promised to report back on was on marijuana in the city. And we were discussing how is it prohibited exactly. So to bring you up on, I've done some research on this, and there's two different ways that it's prohibited. One is in Chapter 1750, and that is where retail marijuana is prohibited in all zones in the city. And since we had this conversation, it's been presented to City Council. There was a zoning text amendment case, and Ordinance 1440 has passed. And part of what that did was continue that prohibition of marijuana and write it into each individual zoning chapter. So, as you know, in each of the commercial chapters, in each of the industrial chapters, there's a list of permitted uses, conditional uses, and prohibited uses. So now it's specifically listed into each zone. That's not a change in policy because it was prohibited in 1750, but it was kind of hidden in the back there. So now it's specifically listed out and it's easier to find. The second way is we have had a moratorium on cooperatives. And cooperatives came out in 2016, and that was new. They replaced collective gardens. So, and what these are, they're really similar. Collective gardens and cooperatives are similar. That's where you can band together and grow your own marijuana for medical reasons. And we just, when it changed to cooperatives, we just adopted moratoriums, and we kept passing a moratorium every 6 months, and the moratorium was about up, and so that's where the conversation, well, maybe we should bring all of the codes up to date at once and permanently write it in. And that's what Ordinance 1440 was about, which had its first reading at the last City Council meeting. There was some discussion. There was one public comment in favor of retail marijuana. City Council discussed it as well. I think, and it passed. So we have continued to prohibit marijuana in Woodland, both retail and cooperatives. But we talked about if somebody did want to open a store here in Woodland, what they could do is bring a zoning text amendment to the Planning Commission. The cost of that application is $2,500. But that would bring the conversation back up and potentially change code if commission and council were amenable at that time.
Would that be in just one particular zone, or would that person say requested in all commercial zones, or could it be whatever his proposal is?
If they're the applicant, they could write it as they wish. Maybe they would even come and have a pre-app meeting, and we might discuss maybe good ways to structure code. But we as Planning Commission and Council have code to use to, if we wanted to allow marijuana in town, do it how we would, do it any way that we like. Like we could have it just in industrial, or just in light industrial, or just a portion of industrial, or just in commercial zones. We have that ability, and we can also say to what standard we would want it. We allowed it as a conditional use, so you could write code specifically about signage, specifically about fencing, or however we wanted to do it. There's a lot of options if somebody wanted to write code that would permit marijuana.
And flexible distances from schools and parks.
So by state, you need to have retail marijuana 1,000 feet away from playgrounds and schools and a number of others. But some of those are flexible, and a city may choose to bring it down to 100 feet. Another thing, a city can choose Everett and Renton chose to limit the number of retail outlets to 5, and they won't accept any more than that. That's another option that's available, that's allowed through city zoning.
We can't violate the minimum state stuff, but we can
No.
increase, because right now you can in the state, we're choosing to pass an ordinance to say we can. We can be more restrictive, we just can't be more permissive.
That's right.
And part of the reason why this came around is the initiative that was passed, and there was the first round of regulations, and the city adopted some stuff. And then there were some changes to state law, and we have been doing moratorium after moratorium after moratorium after moratorium, and the moratorium was coming up, and rather than, because they didn't have time to punt it to the Planning Commission, they asked me to make a change, and I did some quick language that implemented what we were currently doing. And that is what has gone for first reading. Second reading will be on the 21st, so it'll actually become official then. But the conversation it was really their first opportunity as the council that we have to actually have this conversation, because they've been inheriting this kind of Band-Aid that they rip off and reapply every 6 months for multiple years. And the group that did it originally is not the group that we have now. And the group that we have now was actually, sounded like they were like, why did we decide this? Let's have this conversation.
There was a lot more flexible discussion than I imagined was going to be. So, on the other hand, there was only one person who came to speak in favor of having retail marijuana.
So the decision was mostly just for expedience, like something had to be done right now.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Rather than
Yes.
another
The
moratorium.
was expiring, so we brought everything up to date all at once,
Okay.
preserving the existing conditions.
So I watched the first half of that meeting. Has the gentleman that spoke in favor of it, have you had any contact with him about?
Yes, I've
making
seen
that
him in the
change?
office once, and I think we emailed, I sent him a copy of the presentation. And there was another person you've been talking to, but they didn't come.
And since I've been here, there's actually been 2 people who actually talked to me about opening businesses that were kind of stymied by this conversation. And that's how I know the fact that our code is totally hidden. Because the first person I talked to, I said, oh yeah, it looks like it's permitted.
Yeah.
And then only later, like weeks later, did I find the hidden sentence and have to dig out their phone number and call them back and say, hey, don't spend any money on consultants or building designers, because the answer was no.
It took me a while to find it too, but it brought to mind, it wasn't too long ago, a business application came across my desk that I signed off on, and I can't remember exactly where it was for, but it was for a vape shop. And I looked through code, we don't have anything about vape shops. And I think you only have to be 18 to go to a vaping shop. So I just was kind of wondering, maybe we would want to write some code rules about vape shops or not. I mean, if there's no mention of it, I would just consider it retail.
So do you expect this to be coming before the planning commission at some point? Like, is that?
I do.
Yeah.
I would be shocked if you weren't asked to have this conversation, or if you didn't ask to have this as the conversation. Because our Retooling Our Code program is essentially the opportunity for everybody to make suggestions as to what we need to fix, because there's a ton. The problem is I can't do it all at once, and with Melissa here, we're still not even finding that we can do big chunks of it, because it takes time. And that's part of the reason why we brought up this issue of, if you are wanting to open a business in Woodland and you want us to work on it now, you can pay $2,500 to bring it before the planning commission as a code change. But you can't call our office and expect us to, it's going to be the first item on the next Retooling Our Code batch. Now, it may take 5 years for us to get to it again, but if the planning commission or the city council adds it to our Retooling Our Code list, we'll be more than happy to have the conversation. That's what our job is.
Okay, I put some slides together for our general department update. So here's a snapshot of what we've had going on in the community. Building-wise, there's some new houses going in on 3rd Court. That's along Horseshoe Lake, right by the retirement center, kind of near City Hall. And there's a photograph of the location. You can see Horseshoe Lake there, and there's the Woodland Care Center. And there's some pictures of construction going in. They're building about 5 houses there, and they're going to be transition homes for people that they can move into these houses and then later move into the care facility.
Did you, sorry, Melissa, did you jump over the retreat with city council?
Oh, old business. Oh, you know what? I have some slides about it at, retreat with city council. Where are you with that?
Yes. We were asked to talk to you about scheduling some time to meet with the city council, and then I think we asked you that, and then the city council didn't actually schedule one, because we were, I think originally the discussion was the city council would like to meet with you do like a joint planning session for what you're gonna do in 2020. And they wanted to do that in October, and then they never scheduled it. So they
Okay.
didn't pick any dates. We were
Probably
supposed
in
to
the
come to you
future
and say,
then.
oh, yeah, they want to do a half-day retreat on a Saturday, either October 1st or whatever it was. They couldn't arrange a time, so
Yeah, it's an election year, we might as well kick it down the can a couple months anyway.
well, and now they're started the budget stuff, and so I think that's what it was, is all of their brain power is budget oriented rather than working on it. So,
We just had the open government training you're gonna do on your own, I
Yeah.
take it. So-
Oh, that's,
And then
okay, I got you.
You
Frank
just did
was,
that.
we did that. That fascinating
Video thing we
slides
did.
that we were showing. Cool.
Thank
Okay,
you.
sorry.
And in general, should we keep old business on the agenda?
Sure.
Does that seem like
Yeah.
that would be a good system for reporting back? Okay, fantastic.
Sorry.
All right, so here's third court here, going in, there's 3 more homes, 2 homes?
There's 2 homes that have been permitted. There are 3 more lots that are going to be developed, but I have not received applications for those.
Where's third court?
We have townhouses going in at Sequoia Park on Loganberry Court.
Melissa,
Yes?
can you tell us where third court is?
It's right behind that.
Behind the VFW.
It's-
Oh, okay,
It's by the
okay.
Not the
Loganberry Center.
VFW,
It's a
it's
new
Right
name.
on the lake
There's
behind
lunch.
the
Yeah.
assisted living area there.
Right here, so it's a new name for the street, third court.
Okay.
so City Hall is just like right off the top,
Top of the screen.
Like there's a fence and then there's.
just off the street.
Yeah. I never realized that was, I guess I never realized that was so close to the lake. Don't
It
get
used to
back.
be
Most of that
Black
dirt
dirt.
area is steep, isn't it?
Yes,
So,
yeah, going down to the lake is quite steep. And they have quite a bit of replanting to do in that area. It was meant to be planted up in 2014 by the previous owners. So now they'll have to complete the tree planting.
Okay, so those, the picture of those houses are in that, so the
Yes.
grassy patch?
Yeah, 5 houses in that little area.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so townhouses going in at Sequoia Park, that is that grassy area in the top right-hand corner.
So have they, there were some sort of surface water issues out there that
When,
I noticed. This would have been last winter, I believe.
There was?
in the street or in the field before the street went in?
In there was just, yeah, there's some puddling in there.
On the north side of the road, not the south?
I have to,
The 503. The south is all
again.
floodplain probably, isn't it?
yeah, no, it's in this townhouse development.
Yeah, and it
Sequoia Park.
definitely is in the floodplain, and if.
And I,
They've done a lot of excavation in there, though.
The good
They've
news is
cured
the
that.
bottom floor is garage, not living space, so it should be okay.
I remember the planning commission had some concerns about their stormwater plan at the time we approved it, so.
Yes, and they do have stormwater facilities installed there, and it meet the code at the time of its approval. This is kind of one of those last holdovers from the previous staff that we've inherited, and we're now implementing the construction plan as approved.
Yeah, I just received the last 4 townhouse applications back for review. They have been approved, and I invoiced them today, they're ready to be done.
And they do have collection basins, they do have the ponds, whether they're ticklers or whether they're full-on collection and disposal. I don't know.
So are they going all the way over to Sycamore, or are they stopping?
So that hammerhead is the existing development.
Okay, so they aren't going all the way across Sequoia?
It just goes up to Sequoia, it just goes.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a dead end here,
Uh-huh.
and that's not going to connect either one of those right there. And it will not come out to the highway.
Well, no, at the other end, Sequoia Street. Because
Yeah.
on their plans that I was looking at when I was in their little model home. They're saying that they're gonna put a fourplex across that?
There is a fourplex
Yeah,
right there,
across the
yes.
end.
It doesn't look wide enough for a fourplex.
Yeah. And it is a connected
Yeah.
building, so there's no side yard setbacks, but yes, so there's.
Well, yeah, it just does
So
not look.
it's, as far as I know, it's just like one of these buildings, only it's vertical instead of
I
horizontal.
know Clark County will let you go as narrow as 18 feet for one of those townhome
It
blocks.
just does
so-
not look wide enough for,
And for that unit,
Fourplex.
what's interesting about that unit is these are all front loading, whereas this unit right here is back loading. So there will be private access from the rear, and they will head into their garages going north as opposed to coming in off of the street with four separate driveways.
I'm a fan of alley-loaded
I think-
townhomes.
I think we
Townhomes
should-
with front-loaded garages just look like you're looking at a row of garage doors and they look ugly.
Yeah, add that to the code tweaking. I think we should encourage rear-loaded development
Yeah.
everywhere in the city. Much better for pedestrian experience.
Yes.
well, we get some, how about we get some sidewalks out there on that road? Have you ever tried to run that road?
On which road?
The highway out there?
503?
Right there,
Yes.
right there, right in front of those fourplexes right
So
there?
we have a grant, and we have a grant that will eventually connect in front of the fire station there. You see the cul-de-sac, or the roundabout has,
Yeah.
it will eventually go up to the middle school. And we had to break it in half because we didn't get enough grant options, and we just missed the funding. So we're hoping that because we're the first of the roads this
So we get a
year,
sidewalk?
that means we'll be the first of the yes next round. We're hoping. Yes, so Tracy is the rainmaker for project money, and it's like, I can't keep track of how quickly she's jumping on pots of money, but that
Telling you.
specifically is
I like do my,
our
the
list of
whole time
high
I'm running,
priority.
right
Yep.
there.
We
Was
almost
that-
got half of it built this funding mechanism.
Hey, commercial's been pretty quiet recently, but Dutch Brothers opened up. Has anyone been to Dutch Brothers?
I see cars going
I've
through.
paid for it, I haven't gone through it.
Caro syrup is cheaper.
My son's been through it. He loves it.
Well, here's where it's going in. They're done with the construction. They're just working on getting their permanent occupancy. I think the last thing left is the plantings in the biosphere. Is that right? They checked everything off their list.
My son needs the drivers.
And the Hanson Motel is gone, and I've heard they're in conversations with somebody about a deal together development on the old Hanson Motel site, so.
Oh, really?
Any ideas of a potential use?
Not
No.
that I can, I've heard a couple things, but I don't know.
All right, a preview of things to come. We're expecting more houses, as we discussed on Third Court. There is a new house coming up on Dunham. That's one of those.
Yeah.
It's actually happens on that, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that was gonna happen. Okay, got it. All right, so that's all down by the lake. And then there's 4 more units for Sequoia Park we talked about. And a brand new one came in this week for 410 Lilac Lane.
Is that next to the lake, or is it
It
the
is.
other?
Yes. All right, land use wise, we recently issued a notice of decision for the Carpino Business Park. And that is in the light industrial area at the, what is that, Cables and Pekin and
Gorick,
Garrick? Yeah,
it's where
about 40 acres.
all the berry rows of berries are.
Okay, so you probably can't answer this question, but do you know anything about the Carpenito brothers? Because I used to buy truckloads of pumpkins from
Yep.
some Carpenito brothers.
Yes, that is the same family, and this is kind of the development arm of
Yeah.
that.
All right.
Yes,
Okay.
out of Kent, I think Seattle area, they have.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
that's where we got.
I've heard their corn, raisins are raising, and all kinds of things, I'm not surprised. Out of the street.
Next project, we have, let's see. this is KWRL, the school system, and they are planning to expand their parking lot and decommission some oil tanks and provide a new fueling station for the buses there. They've been issued their decision recently, so they'll be able to start building pretty soon. And there's a, nope, that's the ARCO. Yeah, all right, ARCO. So ARCO has also submitted for a site plan review and will be issuing their notice of application pretty soon and then reviewing their submission. And we recently got an agreement to maintain that signage area that's up by the roundabout. So they'll be maintaining the landscape up there.
Is that, it's the, Taco Bell right there.
Oh, okay,
Trailer Depot.
okay.
This is
Oh, back in industrial,
Yeah,
along I-5 sort of.
Right.
Okay.
the only
Okay.
corner that,
There's a trust manufacturing industrial development that's almost like down.
Yeah, yeah.
Buildings just stuck there.
Okay.
This one keeps coming, it's like a bad penny. They had a 2017 approval, and a 2018 approval, but they didn't construct this year. And since they're not constructing this year, they decided to redesign it again. So this will be the third version on the same site. My service is so good, we come back year after year. So-
They never started construction. They were that far.
So it was a truck stop, and then they couldn't do the truck stop, so they did the AMPM with the car wash, and now they're gonna do a car wash AMPM and the truck stop. So,
Oh, they put the truck stop back in?
yes. But there's gonna be no parking, so it's just going to be a big area for the trucks to maneuver and fuel, but there'll be no overnight parking.
I'll go to the Walmart to do that.
yeah,
Right?
I did not say that.
I keep hearing that trucking's gonna be the, the first casualty of automation and battery power, but it doesn't seem like the time I'd be building a truck stop.
Here's the next land use project that we're working on. Redleaf has submitted an application, but we're working on them to get the rest of the application. They need to get a few more materials. That's where they'll be going in. It's near
Oh, nice.
Walmart.
Sweet. High school,
That's
be happy?
Yes.
Is that gonna be an additional location, or are they?
yeah, I
ditching the
was
old one?
wondering, additional, huh?
With the drive.
High school pizza.
Then, at the Burris Creek mini storage site, there's a proposed cell tower, and we are still waiting on a few application materials from them as well. We were just writing up the staff report, and there's too much missing, so we've had to postpone. It needs to go to a hearing examiner, and we've had to postpone. Hopefully, they'll be ready in November.
Is that Dave Simpson's place?
Yes.
You should know better.
Well.
You should get his paperwork done right.
And he has his site plan approval for the expansion. We just changed the Southern Howard Code on it.
Oh, all right, okay.
So there's two
We're off the hook.
applications going in there. So for the expansion of the mini storage, that one's going forward, but the cell tower specifically is held up right now. Last one, we recently had a hearing here concerning Clark Public Utilities would like to tie into the water at Misty Court, and that involves putting a 3-inch pipe under the river. We had a public hearing here, and the neighborhood association came, and they expressed some concerns, and the concerns were about the price of water and water pressure. Use water pressure.
Was that the
Previous
neighborhood association on,
Yes, the
you're
Misty.
on the north side of the river?
Slaughterhouse
Yes.
Corner there?
Because
Yeah.
Yes, right in that area.
Because the project's going to benefit the neighborhood on the south side of the river, as I understand.
It'll benefit Clark
That's all
County.
we're
So
gonna do.
their plan is to fill up a reservoir during the night hours, so it shouldn't affect their water pressure, and then they will be able to better supply Clark County residents through Clark Public Utilities with water. The hearing examiner felt that land use wise, that this project was okay to move forward and has approved it, though we will need to work on a number of, is it an MOU, am I understanding?
Yes.
Between our utilities and the public will be, that's when
Yes.
those concerns will be taken into account,
So
because
are
they
they-
weren't related to land use concerns.
Are they filling up that water tank that is on the south side that's right there in that pasture right there? Because that has had high arsenic levels in it.
So there is that, so that's actually the pump house for the well. And that's the system that they are trying to replace. And what they're actually going to do is they're going to take that pump house for the well and use it to bring water up and send it up to their reservoir. So it'll be retasked, that building. But the reservoir is actually up on this hill here. It serves, I think, about 15 people. And currently, sort of public utilities operates the well and pump it in there.
They're not going to use the pump, though, to use through that to get
No.
up to the hill.
No, so what will happen is the water will be drawn off of our system. It'll be metered here, and they will pay us 150% of our current water rate. And that water will be pumped into the reservoir. And really, I think, my understanding is they'll only have to fill it like every 2 or 3 days.
Because there's not that many homes up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what it is it's just cheaper for them to tunnel under the river than to try and drill more wells or find a water source that doesn't have that arsenic in it.
So it's a 3-inch pipe coming off of, what size pipe do we have already out there?
I believe it's a 8-inch pipe that's currently in this.
It's just dedicated for Misty? It dead ends there?
Yes, so it comes down.
No, they're not
goes
gonna
around
lose
the corner
water
and it's
pressure.
stubbed down there. And there's
That'll be fine.
Asphalt path that goes out to, this is the private recreation lot for the homeowners association. So they're gonna tear up the path and extend the water line underneath that little path. Then replace it. But it's an underground transmission line, so there won't be any long-term environmental impact. And part of the agreement that we're gonna have to negotiate in that is if there's a drought or we have water constraints, that we can cut them off at any time we see fit. It's just the reality of getting water outside of our service area. It's a condition that they've built into.
Seems reasonable.
All right, we've been busy with code enforcement this last month. We've issued a couple courtesy letters. These are just warnings. One went to La Casa de San Juan Diego, and there was issue with parking in the fire lanes there. And we sent a courtesy letter, and our code enforcement officer has been working with the management there. They've been immediately responsive, and have been in touch with the fire department, and they've been making all the corrective actions necessary. There's been a handful of complaints about industrial noises affecting residential areas. And we issued 3 notices and orders last month. One was for the oak tree, and that is a notice and order to the owner of the oak tree about accumulation of junk in the parking lot.
The pallet whisperer?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other is for, was a residential one, a home on Park Street, had quite a bit of vegetation in the front yard and a felled tree. And they received a notice order and immediately responded to that, so that's being cleaned up already. And we are working with Trailer Depot now. They have not installed all of the vegetation and a couple other requirements of their site plan that was approved. And so we need to follow through with the plantings and working with them.
I know it's getting late, and I don't want to drag this on too much longer, but oak tree, they're defunct, right? So what is it gonna do any good to send them, or at some liens?
Somebody still owns it.
Yeah.
Does it, will it do any good?
We've been having meetings with potential buyers and developers looking at the new project.
Okay,
And that's all I can do.
thanks, I just thought I'd ask.
In general, we're seeing about 40 to 90 cases or so per quarter, and just a reminder that it's a complaint-driven system, so we only pursue cases if somebody has complained, if it's caused a problem, a neighbor or any citizen has issued an official complaint, and that's through a form on the website or in the office.
So, can I, silly question? If I make a complaint about someone and they want to know who complained, are you obligated to tell them?
If they fill out a public records request, yes.
Okay.
Sure.
I'd like to point that out, that 40 to 90 cases per quarter, we have a half-time code enforcement officer. And so 90 per quarter means 1 a day. So really what it means is 3 a day, because she's only here 2.5 days a week. So in a quarter, maybe it's really more like 30 working days. So she might get 3 new complaints a day. So
And this number of notice orders is kind of unusual for us. She really excels in getting voluntary complaints from people, and really talking to them face to face and explaining and getting them on board and getting corrected on.
One of the things that we were going to talk about this last month, but we're going to talk about next month, is our code enforcement company. This is why it's really important that we go through the Retooling Our Code list, because just having the conversation about what our code really says actually makes us more effective at being able to do our jobs. Because not only now do we know what the code says, but we make it more efficient and more effective. Some of these code changes will help us in the future.
Okay, Planning Commission, just updates for us. We've got the short course on November 7th. Some of you responded about the carpool. Hope to see you all there. And then
Do you need to know that
next-
do you need to know that I'll be out of town on that day?
Oh, you will?
I will, sorry.
Okay.
I think when we talked about it, I thought I was going to be here, but I won't.
Okay. It's also available online. If you'd like to
Okay.
watch, you can even complete the training and get the certificates that way. And there are, if you look at the website, there's a couple different towns that will host it. So
Ah.
back in Southwest Washington.
Okay.
Then we'll have our 2 public hearings next month. That's all I have for our department update.
I have one note. You may notice that we have August figures, but we do not yet have September figures on building permit reports. I've worked so far this month 4 days in the office, so I'm a little bit behind on my work there. I will have the September figures for you along with the October ones for the November.
What'd you do the other days?
Well,
I'm kidding.
we'll discuss that after the meeting.
Okay, does anybody else have anything they want to add?
We do have the postponed election of officers discussion. Do you want to just pull the trigger and have that?
We should postpone it until she's here.
I think
Do
we
we
probably,
really wanna just
do you think,
postpone it?
has
We might as well
anyone
just-
talked to her that does she express any interest in?
Just do it.
Mr. Chair? You know what, let's just wait. I don't want to do it if she does.
At this point, it won't make any difference if we do it now or the beginning of the next meeting, so we may as well.
Anybody in favor of postponing the election until all the councilors are commissioners? Aye.
Aye.
Yep.
Or postponing.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn? No?
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Don't need one, but sure.
Oh, we don't, okay. Okay, I will now close the public meeting at what appears to be 9:04 PM.
Excellent work, Chris.
Sweet.